The town of Ravens Hollow was known for two things: its thick fog that never seemed to fully disappear and the abandoned playground that sat quietly at the edge of Hollow Creek Forest. The playground had been deserted for over 20 years, yet no one in town liked talking about why. Late October winds howled through the sleepy streets as 17-year-old Emily Carter stepped off the bus, her boots crunching against dried leaves. She had lived in Ravens Hollow until she was 9, but after her father mysteriously vanished, her mother moved them away. Now, after her grandmother's passing, Emily had returned to settle family matters. The air felt colder than she remembered. Not just autumn cold, but something deeper. Something heavy. As she walked toward her grandmother's old house, she noticed the familiar rusted sign across the street, barely visible through creeping vines. Ravens Hollow Community Playground. Her stomach tightened. The playground was exactly as she remembered, yet worse. The swings hung crooked, chains clinking softly though there was no wind. The slide was covered in peeling yellow paint, and the merry-go-round sat tilted like it had been abandoned mid-spin decades ago. Emily quickly looked away and hurried inside the house. The house smelled of dust and lavender, just like her grandmother used to keep it. Boxes were stacked everywhere, and old photographs covered the walls. Emily dropped her bags and sighed, brushing hair from her face. "You'll only be here a week," she whispered to herself. But as she unpacked, her eyes caught an old framed photo sitting on a wooden shelf. It showed her, her father, and 3 other children standing at the abandoned playground. All of them were smiling, except one boy standing in the background. His face was blurred. Emily frowned. She didn't remember him at all. She turned the frame over. On the back was handwriting in faded ink. "Summer Festival. The last day." A chill crept down her spine. That night, Emily lay in bed staring at the ceiling while the house creaked around her. Sleep refused to come. Around midnight, she heard something faint. A metallic squeak. She froze. It sounded like a swing moving. Her room faced the street, facing the playground. The squeak came again, slow, rhythmic, like someone gently rocking back and forth. Emily swallowed hard and sat up. She told herself it was just the wind. Old metal structures made noise all the time. But the sound didn't stop. She slowly moved toward the window, heart pounding loudly in her chest. The fog outside was thick, swirling under the street lamp. She wiped the glass with her sleeve and leaned closer. The swings were moving, not wildly, just slightly. And one swing moved differently than the others, like someone was sitting on it. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She squinted through the fog, trying to see clearly. For a split second, she thought she saw the outline of a small figure. Then the street lamp flickered. The swing stopped completely. The playground stood still again, silent and lifeless. Emily slammed the curtains shut and backed away, trembling. The next morning, she convinced herself it was her imagination. Jet lag, stress, and grief could play tricks on anyone's mind. She decided fresh air would help. The town looked frozen in time. Most shops were small family businesses, and almost everyone seemed to recognize her instantly. "Emily Carter?" asked an elderly woman at the bakery. "You look just like your father." Emily forced a polite smile. "Thank you." The woman's expression changed suddenly, as if she had said something she regretted. "You should be careful staying here," she muttered before turning away. Emily frowned but didn't push further. Later that afternoon, she visited Hollow Creek Library, hoping to find property documents related to her grandmother's house. The library was small and quiet, with tall dusty shelves and yellowing newspapers stacked in corners. Behind the desk sat a teenage boy with messy brown hair and round glasses. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I'm looking for old town records," Emily said. "About Ravens Hollow. Maybe from 20 years ago." The boy studied her face carefully. "You're Emily, right?" She blinked. "How do you know that?" "My dad told me about you," he said nervously. "I'm Lucas." Emily felt uneasy but nodded. "Do you know anything about the playground?" Lucas immediately stiffened. "You shouldn't go there," he said quietly. "I'm not planning to," she lied. "I just want to know why it was abandoned." Lucas hesitated, then slowly walked toward a shelf filled with archived newspapers. He pulled out a thick binder and placed it on the table. "Officially, it closed after an accident during the summer festival," he said. 5 children disappeared. Emily's heart skipped. Disappeared, she whispered. Lucas nodded grimly and opened the binder to a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Tragedy strikes Ravens Hollow. Children vanish without trace." Emily scanned the article quickly. Witnesses claimed the children were playing near the merry-go-round before suddenly vanishing. There were no signs of struggle. No footprints leading away. Nothing. What were their names? Emily asked, her voice shaking. Lucas pointed at the list. Her eyes widened. One name was circled in red ink. Daniel Carter. Her father. That's impossible, Emily whispered. My dad disappeared years later. Lucas looked confused. That's not what the records say. He was one of the kids who vanished that night. Emily felt dizzy. No. He raised me. He lived with us until I was 9. Lucas leaned closer. Are you sure? She slammed the binder shut, breathing heavily. This is wrong, she said, standing abruptly. But as she turned to leave, something slipped from inside the binder and landed on the floor. A photograph. Emily picked it up slowly. It showed 5 children standing near the playground merry-go-round. The photo looked old and faded, but clear enough to recognize faces. Her father stood among them, and beside him was the blurred boy from her grandmother's photo. Except this time, his face wasn't blurred. It was completely black, like someone had scratched it out violently. On the back of the photograph were words written in jagged handwriting. He never left the playground. Emily rushed out of the library, her mind spinning with confusion and fear. None of it made sense. Her father couldn't have disappeared as a child. She had memories with him. Birthday parties, bedtime stories, family dinners. Unless those memories weren't real. The sun had already begun to set, casting long shadows across the town as she walked home. The fog rolled in faster than usual, swallowing the streets in thick gray mist. By the time she reached her grandmother's house, darkness had fallen completely. She locked the door behind her and leaned against it, trying to steady her breathing. Then she heard it again. The swing. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Louder this time, slower, more deliberate. Emily clenched her fists and forced herself toward the window despite every instinct screaming at her to stay away. She pulled the curtain open. The playground was barely visible through the heavy fog, but the swings were definitely moving again. And this time, she could see someone sitting there. A small child, wearing old-fashioned clothes, like something from decades ago. The child's head slowly turned toward her house. Emily gasped and stumbled backward as the street lamp flickered wildly. The fog shifted, clearing just enough for her to see the child's face. It was pale, expressionless, and its eyes were completely hollow. Emily screamed and fell to the floor as the lights inside her house suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Then she heard footsteps inside the house. Soft, wet, dragging across the wooden floor downstairs. Emily's heart pounded so violently she thought she might faint. She crawled toward her bedroom door and locked it, pressing her back against the wall as tears filled her eyes. The footsteps stopped outside her door. Silence filled the hallway. Then a child's whisper slipped through the crack beneath the door. Emily. Her blood turned ice cold. How do you know my name? She whispered back without thinking. The voice giggled softly. You used to play with us. Emily shook her head, sobbing. No. I never. You promised you wouldn't leave. The door handle slowly began to turn. Emily screamed as it rattled violently, shaking against the lock. Come back to the playground, the voice whispered. We're still waiting. The rattling suddenly stopped. The house fell completely silent again. Emily stayed frozen for several minutes before daring to move. When she finally gathered the courage to open the door, the hallway was empty. But on the wooden floor, leading from the staircase to her bedroom, were small muddy footprints, and among them, one set of larger footprints. Barefoot, adult-sized. Emily's breath trembled as she followed them with her eyes. They stopped halfway down the hallway, as if whoever made them had simply vanished into thin air. Then she noticed something else. The front door was wide open. Cold fog slowly drifted inside the house, carrying with it the distant sound of children laughing from the direction of the playground. Emily slammed the door shut, her hands shaking uncontrollably. As she leaned against it, she noticed a single object lying on the welcome mat. A rusted merry-go-round ticket, printed with faded words, Ravens Hollow Summer Festival, one ride only. On the back, freshly written in dripping black ink, Emily stared at the rusted festival ticket lying in her trembling hands. The ink on the back still looked wet, as if it had been written moments ago. "Your turn." Her chest tightened. The children's laughter outside faded into the fog, leaving behind an eerie silence that pressed against the walls of the house. She locked every door and window, then backed away slowly, unable to tear her eyes away from the ticket. "This isn't real," she whispered. But deep down, she knew it was. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, Emily sat at her grandmother's kitchen table, surrounded by old photo albums and dusty boxes she had dragged down from the attic. If the playground was connected to her father's disappearance, the answers had to be somewhere in this house. Hours passed as she flipped through faded photographs. Birthday parties, family picnics, school recitals, everything seemed normal, until she opened a small leather journal wrapped in yellowed cloth. Her grandmother's handwriting filled the pages. Most entries were ordinary: grocery lists, gardening notes, weather observations. But halfway through the journal, the writing became shaky, rushed, almost frantic. Emily's hands trembled as she read. June 12, 2003. The children have started hearing the music again. The playground should have been destroyed years ago, but it keeps calling them. June 14, 2003. Daniel says he remembers things he shouldn't. He wakes up screaming about a game they never finished. Emily swallowed hard, her eyes scanning faster. June 18, 2003. 5 children vanished during the festival 20 years ago. The town buried the truth. The playground was never safe. It was never meant to be built there. June 20, 2003. Emily has started talking to someone in her sleep. She says she plays with them every night. Emily's heart stopped. What? She flipped to the next page. June 22, 2003. Daniel tried to burn the playground down tonight. The fire went out on its own. He says the children won't let him leave again. Emily dropped the journal onto the table, breathing heavily. Her mind raced with broken memories, flashes of running across wood chips, spinning on the merry-go-round, laughing with children she couldn't fully remember. And then, darkness. A loud metallic clang echoed outside, snapping her back to reality. The swing. Again. But this time, faster. Emily stood slowly, gripping the edge of the table for support. Every instinct screamed at her to stay inside, to pretend none of this was happening. But she needed answers. Grabbing a flashlight in her coat, she stepped toward the front door. The fog outside was thicker than ever, swallowing the street completely. The playground was barely visible, just shadows of broken equipment swaying silently. Emily stepped onto the sidewalk, her breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. The swing chains creaked louder with every step she took. "Hello," she called weakly. The movement stopped instantly. Silence swallowed everything. Emily approached the rusted entrance gate, her flashlight beam cutting through the fog. The sign above it hung crookedly, barely holding onto its bolts. She pushed the gate open. It shrieked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The moment she stepped inside, the air changed. It felt heavier, colder, like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees instantly. Her flashlight flickered as she moved deeper into the playground. The ground beneath her boots felt damp, almost muddy, despite no rain for days. She reached the swings. They were still now, empty. Emily let out a shaky breath. Then she heard humming, soft, childlike, coming from behind the merry-go-round. Her flashlight trembled as she slowly turned toward the sound. A small girl sat cross-legged on the ground, her back facing Emily. She wore an old pink dress covered in dirt, and her hair hung in tangled curls down her shoulders. Emily's throat tightened. "Are you lost?" she asked gently. The humming stopped. The girl tilted her head slightly but didn't turn around. "You came back," she said softly. Emily froze. "What do you mean?" The girl slowly stood up. "You promised to finish the game." Emily's hands shook violently. "I don't know what you're talking about." The girl giggled. "You always forget." She turned around. Emily gasped. The girl's face was pale and cracked like porcelain, dark veins spreading beneath her skin. Her eyes were hollow, completely empty, yet somehow still staring directly at Emily. "We never forget," the girl whispered. Emily stumbled backward, nearly dropping her flashlight. "Who are you?" she cried. The girl tilted her head unnaturally. Your friend. Suddenly, the merry-go-round behind the girl began spinning on its own. Slowly at first, then faster. Rust screeched loudly as it picked up speed, though no one touched it. The metal bars slammed against each other violently, echoing through the fog. The girl pointed toward it. Your turn. Emily shook her head frantically. No, I'm leaving. She turned to run, but stopped dead. 5 figures now stood blocking the playground exit. Children. Different ages. Different clothes from different decades. All with the same hollow eyes. You can't leave, one boy whispered. The game isn't finished, another child said. Emily backed away, her pulse hammering in her ears. What game? She screamed. The children slowly stepped closer in perfect unison. Hide and seek. Emily's stomach dropped. Fragments of memory flashed violently through her mind, running across the playground, counting numbers, children laughing, someone crying, and her father's voice shouting, Emily, stop playing with them. You were hiding, the pink-dressed girl said. But you left before we found you. Emily clutched her head as the memories grew stronger, darker. No, I was 9. We moved away. The girl's cracked lips stretched into a disturbing smile. You didn't leave. You were taken. The merry-go-round suddenly stopped spinning. The playground fell silent again. Then a deep voice echoed behind Emily. She's telling the truth. Emily turned slowly, her breath caught in her throat. A tall shadowy figure stood beside the slide. Its form flickered like smoke, barely holding a human shape. And though she couldn't fully see his face, she recognized the voice instantly. Dad, she whispered. The shadow stepped closer into the faint moonlight. For a moment, his face became visible. It was Daniel Carter, but older, tired, and partially fading, like he wasn't fully part of the world anymore. You shouldn't have come back, Emily, he said sadly. Tears flooded her eyes. Where have you been? Everyone thought you disappeared. I did, he replied quietly. But not the way you think. The children began circling them slowly, humming again. They live here, Daniel continued. The playground was built over something ancient, something hungry. It feeds on games, on children, on promises. Emily shook her head, sobbing. Then why didn't you leave with me? Daniel's expression filled with guilt. I tried, he whispered. But once you play, it never lets you go. The pink-dressed girl stepped closer. She was the last player, she said sweetly. She has to finish. Daniel's shadow flickered violently. No, he shouted. She was only a child. She didn't understand. The ground beneath them trembled slightly as the fog thickened, swirling around the playground equipment like living smoke. Emily grabbed her father's fading arm. What happens if I don't play? Daniel's face darkened. It will take you anyway, he said quietly. Suddenly, a loud bell rang from somewhere inside the playground. A rusted scoreboard near the slide lit up with dim flickering lights. Letters slowly formed across its broken display. Final round. Seeker chosen. The children stopped moving and turned toward Emily simultaneously, their hollow eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. The pink-dressed girl smiled wider. You're it, Emily screamed as the playground lights suddenly burst to life, casting long twisted shadows across the ground. The children scattered instantly, vanishing into the fog in different directions. The scoreboard began counting down. 10 o'clock. Daniel grabbed her shoulders urgently. Listen to me, he said. If you find them all before the timer ends, the game ends. You go free. And if I don't, she whispered. Daniel looked away. The playground keeps you forever. The countdown ticked to 9:32. Footsteps echoed somewhere behind the jungle gym. A faint giggle drifted from the slide tunnel. Emily's heart pounded as she turned toward the sounds. Daniel's form flickered violently, growing weaker. I'll try to help you, he said. But it's stronger now. Much stronger. The playground lights began flickering rapidly as the fog thickened into swirling shapes between the equipment. Emily gripped her flashlight tightly, her hands shaking as the timer continued counting down. 8:47. A child's voice whispered from behind her ear. Come find us. Emily spun around, but saw nothing. Only fog, and darkness, and the distant sound of the merry-go-round starting to spin again. Faster, louder, like something massive was waking beneath the playground. The rusted scoreboard flickered violently as the numbers continued. Dropping. 8:12. Emily's chest rose and fell rapidly while she gripped the flashlight so tightly her knuckles turned white. The playground no longer looked abandoned. The broken lights flickered like dying stars above her, casting long, twisted shadows that moved when she wasn't looking directly at them. The merry-go-round spun faster in the distance, its metal frame shrieking loudly as if protesting against time itself. Daniel's fading figure stood beside her, his shape flickering like a weak candle flame struggling against strong wind. "You don't have much time," he warned. "They hide where they were taken, where the playground remembers them." Emily swallowed hard. "How many do I have to find?" Daniel hesitated. "All of them." A child's giggle echoed from the jungle gym to her left. The sound bounced unnaturally across the empty space, making it impossible to tell where it came from. Emily turned slowly toward the structure. The metal bars were rusted and bent in places, and the rope ladder swayed gently as if someone had climbed it moments ago. "Stay close," Daniel said, though his voice sounded distant now. Emily stepped forward carefully, her boots sinking slightly into the damp ground. The closer she moved, the colder the air became. Her breath fogged thicker around her face, and frost seemed to spread across the jungle gym bars. The flashlight beam shook as she aimed it upward. Something moved at the top platform. A small hand quickly pulled back into the darkness. "I see you," Emily whispered, though her voice trembled badly. Silence answered her. Then the rope ladder suddenly dropped from above with a loud snap, slamming into the ground right in front of her. Emily jumped back in shock. A child's whisper floated down from the platform. "Climb." Her instinct screamed at her to run, but the scoreboard beeped loudly behind her. 6:59. She had no choice. Taking a shaky breath, Emily grabbed the rope ladder. The fibers felt ice cold and strangely wet beneath her hands. As she climbed, the entire jungle gym groaned under her weight, metal creaking like it was alive and aware of her presence. Halfway up, she felt something brush against her ankle. Emily gasped and kicked downward, but saw nothing below her except fog swirling thickly across the ground. When she reached the top platform, she slowly pulled herself onto the rusted metal floor. Her flashlight beam swept across the narrow enclosed space. At first, it looked empty. Then she noticed muddy handprints covering the walls. Small ones, dozens of them, and in the far corner, crouched against the railing, sat a little boy wearing a striped shirt and suspenders. His head hung low, dark hair covering his face. "You found me," he whispered without looking up. Emily's throat tightened. "I'm not here to hurt you." The boy tilted his head slightly. "You left us here." "I didn't mean to," she said quickly. "I didn't even know." "You promised," he interrupted softly. His head slowly lifted. His face was sunken, gray, and cracked like dried clay. His eyes were hollow, but black tears streamed from them continuously. "You promised to keep playing." Emily took a cautious step closer. "I was a child. I didn't understand." The boy suddenly lunged forward with terrifying speed. Emily screamed and fell backward as he stopped inches from her face. "Neither did we," he hissed. The scoreboard beeped again, echoing through the fog. The boy froze instantly, his body stiffened like a puppet whose strings had been pulled tight. Then he slowly pointed toward the scoreboard with one shaking finger. "Tag me, or I stay forever." Emily stared at him, confused and terrified. "How?" The boy grabbed her wrist suddenly and slammed her hand against his chest. The moment her skin touched him, freezing cold, shot through her arm like electricity. The boy screamed, a high-pitched, echoing shriek that made the jungle gym vibrate violently. Then his body dissolved into thick black mist, which shot upward into the night sky like smoke escaping a chimney. The scoreboard beeped again. Player found one remaining. 4. Emily collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. Daniel's flickering figure appeared beside her again. "You're doing it," he said weakly. "But it's getting stronger." The jungle gym ladder suddenly snapped apart behind them, falling to the ground with a loud crash. Emily spun around in horror. "There's no way down," she cried. Daniel looked toward the fog-covered ground below. "It doesn't want you leaving easily." The platform beneath Emily's feet suddenly began shifting. The metal bars twisted slowly, bending like melting wax. The entire jungle gym tilted sideways as if gravity itself had lost control. "Jump!" Daniel shouted. Emily didn't hesitate. She leapt from the collapsing structure, landing hard on the muddy ground below. Pain shot through her knees, but she forced herself back up quickly. Behind her, the jungle gym crumpled completely, sinking halfway into the ground like it had been swallowed. The fog thickened again, and somewhere inside it, she heard clapping. Slow, mocking. 5:11. Emily turned toward the sandbox area, where the sound seemed to be coming from. The once bright yellow borders were cracked and faded, and the sand inside looked dark and wet, almost like soil from a graveyard. A small toy shovel sat upright in the center, moving on its own, digging slowly. Emily's breath caught as she stepped closer. The shovel stopped instantly once she reached the sandbox. The sand shifted slightly, then a pale hand slowly pushed out from beneath it. Emily screamed and stumbled backward, but the hand grabbed her ankle tightly. Another hand followed, then another, clawing their way upward as if something buried alive was trying to escape. The sand erupted as a little girl pulled herself out completely. Her body was covered in black mud, and her eyes glowed faintly inside hollow sockets. "I waited the longest," she croaked. Emily shook uncontrollably. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The girl tilted her head, then finished the game. Emily squeezed her eyes shut and reached forward, pressing her trembling hand against the girl's muddy shoulder. The moment she touched her, the ground beneath them cracked loudly. The girl let out a piercing scream as her body disintegrated into ash that scattered into the fog. The scoreboard beeped again. Player found 2 remaining. 3. The merry-go-round screeched louder behind her. Daniel staggered slightly, his form flickering worse now. "You have to hurry," he warned. "It's waking up." Emily wiped tears from her face. "What is it?" Daniel looked toward the ground beneath the merry-go-round. "The thing beneath the playground," he whispered. "The thing that started the game." Suddenly, the ground trembled violently. Cracks spread across the playground floor like spiderwebs. The merry-go-round spun uncontrollably now, sparks flying from its rusted joints. A deep rumbling growl echoed from underground. Emily backed away slowly, her heart slamming against her ribs. From beneath the spinning merry-go-round, dark smoke began seeping through the cracks in the earth. The smoke twisted and curled upward, forming shapes that looked like reaching hands. The scoreboard flickered wildly. 3:26. A child's voice whispered near the slide tunnel. "Over here." Emily turned toward it slowly. The slide looked longer than before, impossibly long. Darkness swallowed its entire interior like a tunnel leading somewhere far deeper than the playground. Daniel's voice trembled. "That's where the last 2 usually hide." "Usually," Emily whispered. "They don't like being found." The slide entrance creaked as Emily approached it. The metal felt warm now, unnaturally warm, like something breathing beneath it. She shined her flashlight inside. The beam didn't reach the end, only endless darkness. A faint giggle echoed from deep inside. Emily swallowed hard and climbed inside the tunnel. The temperature dropped instantly. The metal walls felt slick and damp beneath her palms as she crawled forward slowly. Behind her, the playground lights began flickering violently. Ahead of her, she saw 2 faint glowing shapes sitting at the far end of the tunnel. Children, waiting. The scoreboard beep echoed through the metal tunnel like a heartbeat. 2:41. Suddenly, the tunnel behind her slammed shut with a deafening metallic crash. Emily screamed and spun around, but the entrance had completely vanished. She was trapped inside the slide, and the glowing children at the far end began crawling toward her. Faster, bending their limbs at impossible angles, their hollow eyes glowing brighter with every second.